Jody Schaefer with HRM Services, and this is HR Hot Topics, the most informative 5 minutes of your month. This is a new program that we're kicking off in 2019. We had a sneak peek last month as we talked about two important pieces of legislation that were recently signed into law. But this is our official launch, and so welcome. We're really pleased that you're joining us. Our plan is to do these 5-minute videos every month and send them out and focus on HR-related topics. It could be changes to employment law, it could be initiatives that are happening at the state and or federal level, or just good tips and tricks to keep in mind as you interact with your staff. Now, some of you may recognize me. You may be a current client of mine, or perhaps you've seen me in one of our trainings, but we're launching some new services this year. So despite what you think you know, I want to make sure that I give you a little bit of information about what's to come. So as I said, we're going to be doing these 5-minute videos every month just to give our folks a nice resource, a quick place to go and make sure that you are in tune with what's happening. We've also launched a new online website for HRM services, and so the new web address is workwithhrm.com, and I'm really excited about that. That's been a labor of love and about a 6-month process, so I'm pleased to roll that out. But we've also developed a second online resource for you, and it has to do with training. And so that website is hrhazmat.com. And we have our first online training available on there, and it talks about preventing sexual and discriminatory harassment in your workplace. So that's something we get a lot of requests for, and certainly we come on site and do those kinds of trainings face to face. But we wanted to make sure that we had an online resource as well that was fully customizable and available on demand, which really works well if you've got employees on multiple shifts or multiple locations. So feel free to go to hrhazmat.com to check that out. We will be adding additional topics and trainings on there throughout the year. So let's talk about this ballot initiative from November that legalizes recreational marijuana. And how does it affect employers? Think about it like you think about alcohol. Just because alcohol is legal doesn't mean you can consume it at work or be under its influence while on the clock. And the same is true for marijuana. So just because recreational marijuana and medical marijuana are both legal in our state does not mean that you can be under the influence of those substances or consuming or ingesting those substances while at work. So employers, if you have a zero tolerance policy, those are enforceable 100%. This law does not change that. And if you don't have a zero tolerance policy, you should seriously consider drafting one because you have obligations as an employer to have a safe workplace. You have OSHA obligations as well. So a zero tolerance policy is a good idea. If you have one, check the language of that because it should specifically spell out marijuana. Because a lot of the ones I've seen say illegal drugs, which used to be umbrella language and it covered marijuana, but now that marijuana is legal in all of its forms in our state, just simply saying illegal drugs is not enough anymore. So you want to take a look at your policy language, make sure you specifically spell out marijuana as well as alcohol and various other things. You have the right to test if you have reasonable suspicion, or if you have a random testing policy, that's fine. And certainly you can discipline and or terminate if those tests come back positive. Now, one thing that I think hasn't been talked about a lot, but it's worth noting, if recreational marijuana is now legal, and THC, which is the active ingredient in marijuana or in cannabis, is in your bloodstream, there's a difference between that and alcohol. In other words, alcohol does not linger in the bloodstream as long as THC. And so you could very possibly have an employee who partook in marijuana on Saturday legally, not on the clock, but in their home residence, and then come to work, and on Wednesday, you could test them and that THC could still be in their system, even though they may not have ingested any marijuana from Saturday to Wednesday. So I do see this being an issue, that the test is not specific enough, and we don't have any sort of a standard to measure kind of the parts per million of THC against some sort of a scale to let us know whether or not someone's under the influence. like we do with alcohol. So I think the testing protocol is going to be something that becomes troublesome for some employers. Again, if they have any in their system at all, you can still discipline and terminate for that. But I'm just kind of thinking through practical ramifications here. Another one is your pre-employment screening. So if you have a pre-employment drug test as part of your intake policy, you can still have those, absolutely. But I think the number of people that begin to test positive for THC on those pre-employment drug screens is going to increase. And I think somewhat drastically, because it's now legal, right? And that THC stays in your system a long time. So I can see employers having to take a look at that and decide whether they want to keep that as part of their process, or whether it is limiting the labor pool to the point where they decide to take a different approach. So those are just a few things to be thinking through. But the bottom line here is that just because marijuana, recreational and medical, are both now legal, does not mean that you as an employer have to allow them in your workplace. So I hope that you find this 5 minutes informative, and we'll see you next month.